Everyone, so excited to be here again, especially when it's Tuesday, which means Beverly Glazer. And today we have a special first guest, Imogen Ayers, who I've been very, very impressed with. Had an opportunity to spend some time on Zoom, and I'm sure you're going to be very interested in hearing more about Imogen. Our word of the day is advocacy, and the umbrella that we are under is women's empowerment. So, Beverly, why don't you go first? Share a little bit of where you've been, what you've been doing, and then we'll move right to Imogen.
Well, absolutely, Dawn. First, I want to welcome Imogen and everyone else who is listening, and I encourage them all to come in on the chat and talk to us and just express your opinion as well, because without you, there is no us. We're talking to air. So I encourage everybody to just get on out there. I've been fortunate to be co-hosting with Dawn. I was going to say helping Dawn, but he needs no help. Co-hosting with Dawn. I'm all about women's empowerment. I serve older women to get their power and their purpose, particularly when they feel that they've lost it, what they've been doing. You know, when you put all your energy into your career, and when you put all your energy perhaps into your home life, and there is a disconnect. And then what happens when you go into retirement? It's like, retire from what? What's next for me? So I help women connect those missing links. And the reason I focus on women is because women play so many different roles, from mother, from caregiver to elderly people, from, you know, clients. I'm talking personally myself, where you have a career, but you also have a home. And then what happens is things get disconnected. So this is what I do. I literally empower women to take their own power, because I believe that we are so much stronger than we even know we are. And life kicks in all the time. And I'm anxious to hear about Imogen, because she's a Gen Zer. She comes from a completely different frame of mind. And we did not have the advocacy. We did not have the privileges that your generation, Imogen, has. And it's because of our fight. We're continuing to fight, because I'm continuing to fight for women over 50 who sometimes want to be in, or feel they should be in, that box. And you're from a generation that says, what box? So I think that that's awesome. And I welcome you.
Well, thank you, Beverly. Imogen, I know you're kind of fresh to this program and new to our audience, so why don't you take a little bit to give a little background. I was very impressed that you had a post that went 90,000 views on LinkedIn, which is incredible, and you've had 100 podcasts already that you've done. So Imogen, share a little bit with our audience, and everybody's looking forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you, John. Yes, so I am based in the UK, just a little bit of background there. And currently I'm at the stage just before university, hoping to go to university in September. But the post that Don is referring to there is with my podcast, which I started about a year and a half ago. I've done about 120 episodes now. And I was really interested in looking at going into medicine. But I didn't have any medics in my family. I didn't really know how that works, what it's like in the UK, how you get into the NHS, how you get into university if you want to do medicine. So I started interviewing medical students, junior doctors. How does this whole process actually work? And through that, I realized, actually, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to go into medicine. And I built up this network and this following of people who could see that I was asking a lot of questions, helping people my age see what's going on in the medical space and how to get into medicine and medical school. And so I did this post where the headline was, I have decided not, in capitals, to study medicine. And I think everyone was kind of just so expecting me to do this. I'd obviously put a lot of work into finding out the information, finding out what it's really about, to then not do it. I think they were quite surprised. But at the same time, what I will mention, because that's why the post kind of went crazy, is because a lot of people, especially doctors, they kind of said, actually, you know what, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you've made the right decision. Like, actually, and they don't want to tell you when you're all excited and like, yeah, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a surgeon. Because they're like, no, that's great. And obviously, we do need medical professionals. But at the same time, they were quite pleased that I'd decided to go for something else. So that's where I am now, hoping to do something a bit more biomedical sciencey in September. But in terms of women's health and, you know, talking about women empowerment, a lot of the people I interview and have interviewed at events, they are advocates for women's health specifically. And so talking to them, I spoke to someone who's basically come up with the cure for preeclampsia. And I go to these events and they say, you know, women's health, 51% of the population are women. So if we're not focusing on women's health, we're not focusing on everyone's health, because as you said, like we don't just go to work, we have a home as well. We have other people that we care for. So that's kind of how I work within women's spaces and women's health. That's what I interview people about as well.
Well, that sounds great. So how do you see live streaming, podcasting as providing a foundation for you going forward?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, well, one, it kind of helps you build a network because you can literally talk to the best people you want to talk to. And the more confident you get with it, the not necessarily bigger, because you don't even have to be big. You can just go for it and ask someone, please come on my podcast. And quite a lot of the time they'll say yes. And it's building a good, as you said, foundation of people who know you. And so in the future, say after university or even now, if I want to get a summer job, but in health tech, in the thing I want to go into, I'm going to just say, hey, I've spoken to you for an hour already. You know who I am, or you can recommend me to someone else. It works quite well like that. So I'd say that's how it's setting me up for the future.
Well, sounds great. Well, Beverly, you know, it's so interesting that we've had such a diverse collection of guests with us, and everybody brings their own unique perspective, and everybody can learn differently from different perspectives. So, you know, how do you see, you know, diversity and inclusiveness supporting women's empowerment and being an advocate for it?
Well, I see exactly what Imogen is saying. The more you're out there, the more you can talk. And as far as a podcast goes, or just as a segue right back to your post, for a girl to be able to stand up there and say, I don't want to be a doctor, what a privilege that is. Okay. I have had clients, both male and female, who are doctors. And one in particular who was in medical school at the time, and he was so conflicted because he had so many years to go. Okay. And he was already in it. And you have the family behind you. You know, we all want a doctor in the family, et cetera, right? So to have a girl who at one time couldn't even go to medical school, this was a privilege. And they looked at it as this isn't even an opportunity for girls. What kind of life are you going to have? And you're going to get kickback from your parents and from everybody. So you really had to fight to get out there. And now we have someone saying, no, I'm interested in medical science, but I don't want to be a doctor. And doctors are speaking out now. So to your point, Dawn, we are open today to talk. We are open today to advocate for ourselves, which is exactly what Imogen is able to do. Through my podcast as well, I meet the most amazing women who've gone through such tremendous challenges. And I could never in a million years have met these people without my podcast. And Imogen, you do know how the competition out there to find the right jobs and to get the right people behind you. By doing that, you've already networked. People see who you are. And much like on live streaming right now, we're talking to who knows who. And we welcome that. We only see the comments, but who knows who we're speaking to. And if we're giving value to someone else and they get it, well, how wonderful is that? And this is what live streaming is. And this is what standing for who you are is so important. And women do not have to be shy. We don't have to be in the closet, so to speak. We don't have to be nice and say what we're supposed to say. We can say what we feel. And this is what today's generation is about. And I am so excited to see you just going out there and saying, okay, world, I'm not sure, so I'm going to ask you. And on social media, quite frankly, this is what we do. This is what you do every day, Dawn. You're going to ask a question, you're going to do a poll. And what you're doing is you're making decisions through that poll. And you're making life decisions through your podcast without even realizing it. And I think that's so awesome, Imogen. And we all have the opportunity today to be able to do this. And it's like, whoa, kudos to you. Good stuff.
Well, Beverly, you really capsulize things in such a wonderful manner for everybody to appreciate and understand. What impresses me about Imogen is how poised she is, how articulate she is, and how confident she is. And that comes through interactions, conversations, because you grow, because you become part of the mosaic of which you surround yourself with. So I've learned so much from Beverly and Kelly and Harvey and on and on and on, because they say something that they've had to live or experience, and you get to absorb and integrate into what you're doing. And it really just kind of says it's not who you are, how old you are, it's how you connect with an audience, how you bring value to the audience. And that should only be the only thing that really matters. Before I swing it back to Imogen, we've got our our audience. I think it might be Carrie. Kelly's here. Kelly's just phenomenal.
Kelly.
Has her own show, The Awesome Journey, that actually follows this show at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with Christy Howard, focused on military and first responders and their mental health. We've got Omar, who has the Zoom Party show, and just a wonderful gentleman who is always out there helping individuals, especially children. My grandson, who is 11, was on his show, so has about 7 years on Imogen even, so never too young. Carrie says hello to us. Very nice to have you. So Imogen, now that you're in the swing of things here, how do you bring advocacy to what you're doing?
Yeah, that's okay. Yes. Advocacy, obviously, the whole umbrella of this conversation is about women's empowerment. So in terms of that, I think going back again to some events I've been to recently, I was speaking to the head of women's health for the UK, Dame Leslie Regan, and it's having those conversations where a lot of people, you might have heard of, this is quite hard because obviously you guys are in America, so I don't know who you would have heard of, but Davina McCall, maybe you might have heard of her. Like a lot of big names in the UK would have heard of her, or maybe older women, as we're saying here, 50 plus, might have heard of these people. But for people my age, we have no idea who these people are. Like we haven't been around long enough to know who they are or to know how important they are. So it's me trying to, I talk a lot about bridging the gap, whether that's between companies and people with ideas, or whether that's between like different silos. But in terms of having these people that I speak to that at events who have experience, have obviously been in the industry quite a long time, you know, if they're curing preeclampsia, they have experience. They're a lot older in terms of that sense. But it's me being at those events, getting the knowledge, and then sharing it with more people my age. And I think that's where advocacy kind of comes in. I help people realize, oh yes, no one's ever told me this before. And in a context of women's health, we don't necessarily get educated on it as much as we should. I'm not sure what it's like in America. I'm sure we have the same problems, honestly. But we're just not educated the same way. And older women, they've obviously been through more of life, so they know what goes on more. So it's bridging that gap between the people who have the knowledge and people my age have no knowledge, no experience, don't really know what's going on. is kind of sharing that with us so we can use that information and do something with it.
Yeah, that's so terrific. And it reminds me that, especially Harvey Tuck, who I'll put a plug in, that has the franchise show that follows this and has been with us for about 7 months and has joined our collaboration group also. He's the #1 franchise event, although he's only been in franchising less than a year. So it doesn't mean if you have an event, you have to be the thought leader or the icon in that industry. You just have to be the gatekeeper, the facilitator, the moderator. And I think part of advocacy is bringing people together, but educating, informing, and elevating everybody in that regard to really make it impactful. And I wish, like Beverly says, I was doing this at 18, because I can only imagine what 5, 10, 20 years could do. And instead of having to think what someone's purpose is to allow it to develop within oneself. And I think formal education is great, but self-education is so much more fun and exciting. So Beverly, it's so nice to have the full spectrum to address.
Yeah, when I'm listening, I'm also listening and I'm hearing that the most important thing is really self-esteem and the feeling that you can do it and that you can make a difference. And a lot of women in my generation have been put down. And there was a feeling, and there still is, that I am not good enough. I am not strong enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not enough. I'm too old. I'm not smart enough. I can't go back to school. Blah, blah, blah. Enough. Okay. Not good enough in general. And so when we have degrees such as I do, or you have doctors or lawyers or whatever you've gone in that path, that can give you to the world your letters, your capability, but the feeling within you is not necessarily that you are good enough. And you can be the best at your job or the best at whatever, and the world keeps seeing you as that. But as a human, where are you? So what women are now doing, and hopefully more and more, is saying, I am okay. I can be okay. Even if I don't have that education, I have so much value for what I know and for what I've done in my life. And what I'm thinking right now is a podcast that I'm just off. So we're just, it's in my head. And I'm interviewing a former attorney who decided to stop litigation, although she was really helping litigate and now really working with these women. This is for domestic violence issues. And I've worked with women in domestic violence on a whole other level. She's working with women that really cannot afford help. But it's really being a pleaser to that person and getting involved in some real heavy stuff. And in her case, her niece, during her college years, went to her boyfriend's dorm intending on breaking out and got shot. And this was in America. And this was quite a few years ago. Now we know there's such a thing as domestic violence, and we have advocates for that. But what goes on was still that feeling, what happens behind closed doors, lady, you don't have a good household. You cannot control your man. It was all really about that. And what stays in the closet or stays in your house belongs there. So what's terrific about what's going on now with you, Imogen, and with all girls now, you're standing up and you're saying no. And you don't have to go back and be nice and try to make, this guy, appease him and say, you know what, let's just break up. And, now it's no is no. And we stand up and we stand firm. And at one time that was discouraged. And for older women, there's still that safety net of having to be nice. And you could still be nice and still be assertive. So this is a huge difference with the older women and your generation, the Gen Zers. Yay, you're going to break that mold, and we need that.
Well, I think you make so many valid points, Beverly, because everybody is standing on the shoulders of the people who preceded them, who opened the road, who took the bigger chances. And I think what's almost the most compelling element is people now get their own true, authentic voice, that they have a platform. And before you had to be invited on or qualified or get through the gatekeeper, now you become all of those for everybody else, that now you could expand the road. You can make people feel like they're not alone. And I think that's the challenge, is so many people work within a vacuum, and all they have is their own loop and their own experiences that keep them down. And when people have freedom and people have access, great things can happen to so many, because naturally, if someone says, well, Imogen can do it, why can't I? Right? And you prove that you don't have to be a superstar. Superstars didn't start out superstars. There's so many people that said, took me 10 years to be an overnight success. And I, that's so true. So, Imogen, how do you add to what we've just shared?
Well, I think at the start you said how a lot of the time previously, there'd be this, that, and the other thing that kind of puts women in a box, and how that box just isn't really a thing. Like, we have just obliterated the box, I think, over the last few generations. And obviously there are still things, it'd be silly to say there isn't. But at the same time, going back to what you said just now, I think we're just, as a generation, very good at setting boundaries. You can go, yes, okay, I'm not going to be mean, I'm not going to be harsh, but I am going to be firm with you, and I'm going to say, actually, no, that's not okay. Whether that's in a domestic setting or a work setting or a school setting, actually, no, I'm not comfortable with that. That's not okay. We can work through it and find something that does work. But I think what we're very good now at doing is setting boundaries, but also, and going back to boundaries, actually, a lot of the time people put boundaries on us that are kind of negative rather than constructive. And we just go, actually, no, just going to move on with that. Just going to say, right, I recognize that there's an issue, or there's something that's blocking me from carrying on. But I'm going to find a way to move past that. And I was talking to a group of girls around my age, and they run a podcast called The STEMinists. And it's about women in STEM, women in science, who are also, women in science, kind of advocating for that. And they were talking about, so how do you kind of deal with that day to day? Is it a struggle? How do you deal with that? And I said, yes, obviously, being a woman in science, it probably is quite male dominated. And that's what seems to be the case a lot of the time in a lot of fields. But I think what I'd say is, now there's such an attitude of recognizing, okay, I might be the minority in this setting, or for me in the future in this lab that I'm working in, but I'm not going to let that be a barrier to me to do well. I'm going to see that as a challenge. And that's where I was getting with, like, seeing some of these things as challenges to kind of overcome, rather than barriers to stop you from doing what you want to do. So I think as a generation, we're just very good at doing all of that, basically.
Well, that's so important, because there is opportunity for change. Some comes faster, some comes slower, but as everybody keeps moving ahead, and it's the little things done right over time that compound and really define and portray who you truly are. So you start as whoever you started as, but that's the beginning. That's not the end. So, Beverly, I know you've been working through so many dynamic situations, because every person is different, is unique in their own way, and you need to qualify or identify, and then be able to support and complement what they're doing. So how does that typically take place?
Okay, I don't know how to answer that question specifically. But everybody knows, no matter how successful you are, what's missing. And so the lead is really for yourself. And so how do I advocate? It really depends on what that person is feeling. And it's generally, there's a gap. And the gap is, I'll go back to just simplistic language, I'm not good enough. And it's like something is missing and it's always with me. And so what I do is I ask the questions. It's really a lot of Socratic questioning to have whoever I'm talking to understand that everything that we know and everything we do comes from within us. So when we twist our thinking, we change our behavior. And so to allow that person to have self advocacy is really what it's about. Because when you stand in your own beliefs and your own vision, then nothing can bring you down. So if you're looking for a better job, or if you love your job, and let's choose medicine, but it's not fulfilling and it's really hard, and you're doing it here. I think in the UK too, there's Medicare. I am, it's the same in Canada. I am out of the system. I do private, and there's a reason for that. But what goes on is it's hard to be a part of the system. It's hard also to do anything privately. But when you're getting fulfillment in what you're doing, you feel complete with that. But what happens is there are missing links everywhere. And when someone comes to me, much like, I'm pivoting again, being asked to speak in a summit, which happens to be with healthcare, and it happens to be with women physicians, etc. Just in that right now, what it is they cannot rest. They cannot allow themselves to unwind. In other words, not be the doctor, not be the leader. And this is something that I've spoken to, and I found it even with myself, creating that balance that you're not put in that slot. You put yourself in that slot. And society has often put you in that slot. But you're more than the label. You're more than the doctor. And what I've also found is for people in the younger generation, I don't know if you've seen that yet, because I'm thinking of also Gen Zers, but they're also in college. And what happens is there is a feeling that now I have to be everywhere. I know when my mother went to university, the caption was, you go to university to get your MRS, which is really not nice, but it was there. You go to catch a man. Okay. Well, I don't think so. Okay. Now, when I went to university, it was a whole other thing. But then again, hey, between the 60s and the 70s, we knew it all anyway. But back in, now it's, I do have to be terrific. I do have to be an influencer. I do have to be smart. I do have to be all of the above. And I've heard that from Gen Zers who says, the pressure is really on us. Back in the day, okay, if you were pretty, you'd find a man, you'd get married, you have kids. You may not be happy with it, but everyone else would be, and you'd have a role. Well, now it's, I have to be the best. I do have to catch a man, but if I don't catch a man, that's fine. I can put my eggs in frozen. There's so many different ways that you can live your life, and it's all acceptable. And that's pressure too. And this is really what I've heard from a lot of young girls who do say, not just one, that now that when I'm in school, it is major pressure, particularly if you want to succeed and the jobs aren't out there, and you have the pressure of everything, being smart, being pretty, finding someone, because everybody wants love. Nobody, wants to be alone, but yes, it's just so much. So I'm going to ask you, Imogen, have you felt that yet? I know you're not in university yet, but have you felt that? pressure to be all things to all girls?
I think when you first said it, I thought, oh, I don't know. But the more you spoke about it, yes, I definitely think I have, because I went to a grammar school for the first few years of kind of secondary school, when I was about 12, 13, 14, 15. And so it's competitive. You have to do an entrance exam to get in. So you're already kind of against each other from the get-go, which is fine, because it can be healthy competition, and you want to do well and you want to work hard, but at the same time that was already quite an obvious reason to start being against each other and start competing. And then there's the added pressure, obviously, trying to look a certain way, trying to be a certain way, trying to do certain things outside of college, outside of school. And so I definitely think that's definitely the case. And whether that's come with social media as well, because obviously before social media, before phones, it was you just are who you are in real life. And people know what you look like in real life. People know what you are like in real life. But now everyone has a completely second, third, fourth persona on their phone. And you look at the pictures people post, I do the same thing. That is not what we look like in real life. That is not what we act like in real life. So you're kind of trying to compete in real life with all the things you've said. But now with the whole modern age, you've got to compete online as well and be a certain way online. And I guess with that, there's more pressure because your competition's bigger. Because in real life, you have your village, you have your town. That's about it. On the phone, the world is your competition. Like in that sense, yes, it's a lot more pressure, and I've definitely experienced it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what it identifies, and I've learned this by doing so many shows. No one really cares what you do until they figure out who you are, right? So it's who you're becoming, and everybody could look at themselves as a work in progress. And knowing there's so much pressure from the outside should allow people to take pressure off from the inside, right? And get more comfortable, take more time. There is no rush, because if this is going to be sustainable, it has to be a long-term effort, but a comfortable effort. And too many people force too soon, too fast, too much, and then they experience burnout, or they get too sensitive to outside influences. So you really have to be protective of yourself, of your privacy, of your different interests. And I think, everybody is very wise, just like Imogen, to pick an area, a specialty, a niche, right? Because, anytime you try to be everything to everybody, you're nothing to anybody in time, and you're not proud of yourself. You're right. So at the end of the day, and I think Beverly really identified earlier, you help one person who you may never meet decide to go a better way or a different way than they anticipated. And now you've got real value, because conversation only goes so far, but action based on what someone just heard, or really being the role model to say, if I can do it, you can do it. And if you can't do it, maybe we can do it. And I think that's where the collaborative, cooperative effort really comes in. I want to identify Minerva, who knows Beverly very well. She's up in Canada also, in Ontario. I know Beverly's up in Quebec. And Minerva's been a great advocate in government and everything she does. So welcome, Minerva. So, with all this said, what is this doing to expand your vision, Imogen?
Sorry, could you just
round
up the question a little bit?
Yeah, what is this doing to expand your vision of what you can do and how you can create the most value for what you do?
As in this kind of conversation?
Sure.
So I think that, well, these kind of conversations in general, in terms of expanding what I do, as you say, there's conversations, and you can only go so far with conversations. But I think if you just had one conversation in a room, with no one recording it, no one writing down what you're saying, then yeah, that helps you, that helps the person. You can keep it to that if you want. But I think the benefit of doing live streams like this, doing podcasts like I do, is going back to that idea of sharing information, sharing it with people who might not get it otherwise. I know I'm in a very privileged position to be able to talk to people like you, to be able to go to events and talk to people I do, have people on the podcast that I do. And being the only person maybe under 21 there, is quite a privilege. And there's no, as I said, there's no one else my age, so how they're going to get that information, how they're going to get this insight on self-help, what to do, having all these kind of deep, serious, mature conversations, they just don't get it. And that's fine. They just don't have I don't know where I'm trying to go specifically with this, but as I said, I just know I'm very privileged to be where I am, but no one else is in this very specific, as you say, niche area that I'm in. So what I get out of it, firstly, is just having the conversations with the people. Again, as I said, I could stop. Great for me. But it's the sharing information that makes it beneficial. That with the people my age that would never, ever hear those conversations, never hear that information, I think that's what's so great about it. And I get something out of it just from sharing, because people say, oh my gosh, I would have never thought of it like that. And just having those different ideas, hearing from different people that they otherwise would have, so they can have a slightly different perspective and then go on to do, as I say, action whatever they want with that, hopefully for the better, and kind of learn tips from people that they otherwise never would have.
Well, I think that's terrific. And what comes to mind is, although you're of a younger age, you're actually a very experienced veteran in what you do that really supersedes what everybody hasn't done in those areas, right? So many people have been focused on legacy, tradition. Here's what I've done. I've always tried to do better, but they haven't pivoted. They haven't opened their community or expanded their horizon and brought people in. So I believe everybody can learn from everybody. And that's the beauty of what we're doing here, is collaborative knowledge share, and more importantly, thought-provoking, right? You can't make a change until you realize, hey, there's an opportunity I never realized, and now I'm going to integrate that in what I'm doing. Beverly?
Yeah, I think it's all about sharing information. And this is what we're doing right now. We're sharing information. And when we're live streaming, or when we're doing a podcast, or on any of the social media, that's what everybody is doing, sharing information. And we get what we want from it. And we do not have to be totally influenced by it. And I think that is also a thing. People follow other people, and we always go to the glitz and the glamour and all that kind of thing. We can evaluate what we want, and that is something that is open to us today. Community is where you share information. And it doesn't matter where your community is, as long as it's a like-minded group of people, that is your community. And the more we talk openly, and the more we feel comfortable about who we are, what we do, then we will say more of who we are and what we do, because you're in a safe space. And so I don't know about you, but here we are. You're in the UK, I'm in Canada, Dawn is down there in Denver. People are listening all over the world. This is absolutely incredible. But I feel, just by talking right now to just you guys, I'm in a safe space. I may not be, okay? And that's the same thing when I've been doing live radio for a good 5 years, every single day, etc. And I'm talking to everybody in the entire city, and here I am in my little booth, right? And I just knew that there was the weatherman, the control man, the director, etc., and just me, and that's all I was talking to. The fact is, we make a difference when we open our mouths, and that's whether it's in the family unit, And that's whether it's in the academic world, and that's whether it's here right now. And we have to be ourselves and advocate for who we are. And if you are feeling strong, a strong sense of self, it doesn't matter. You can be comfortable. It doesn't matter who you are, be yourself. And this is what I'm hearing from you, Imogen, that you are learning so much by just being yourself, going out there, finding out what the world is like, using the technology that's available to you, and learning for yourself. But look how much you're getting back. And we can all do that. And that's why I encourage particularly women, particularly older women, because those little boxes that we've been put in, we have the opportunity today to get out. And this is your life, guys. This is it. Okay. So what you have to do is not fear it. Take a risk, take a leap. And once you take a leap just to be yourself, I'm asking for nothing more than that. It's so liberating. And that's what I help women, usually of an older generation. But as you can see, I told you, I speak to Gen Zers, I speak to men. Okay. People are people. But ultimately, we hold ourselves back, and we hold ourselves back no matter how high up we've achieved, because there's always that I'm not good enough there. And that's where you have to let go and you say, yes, I am good enough. In anything I do, this is what I can do. I cannot do anymore, so it has to be good enough. It's the feeling of being complete. It's the internal feeling, and to advocate for yourself.
Well, that's so profound and so valuable. And what comes to mind is you can be reactive or proactive. You could wait your turn or you could take your turn. And it's up to you to make that decision, and you can do it at any level, right? Start where you are with what you have and work from there versus, well, when I get this, when I know this, when I meet this, then I'll be able to do that. Well, if that happens, that'll happen anyways. While you're waiting, you should be doing. With that said, want to go back right to the audience. Minerva says, good to be here. And then she comes back with, we add value through our employment experience, from family stories about how they did this or that and how we exceed. Carl's here. Carl was amazing yesterday with Ford.
I heard him.
And it was just great. And it actually allowed Carl to get invited on Ford's show, which I'll be we taped and it should be showing up. So thank you, Carl. Carl actually is here tomorrow with his funding event, who's here every other Wednesday. Omar comes back with, good morning, nice to see you again with new guests. Absolutely. Minerva is being open to sharing. Oh, we've got Kevin here, and I know Kevin Imogen, because Kevin's Imogen's father. And it's a family affair. And I know Imogen has a younger sister that's also active in social media. So it's nice to have that threesome going for each other. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin was a great guest about a week and a half on this show, and it's focused on franchising and video. And I know was a guest at Harvey Tuck's show, which is so great to see you, Kevin. Minerva says one of my mottos is be the difference.
Yes.
Kevin says, I love that. Wait your turn versus take your turn. Beatrice comes back with, thanks. We have the key to free ourselves from the box they try to put us in with helping hands. Thank you all for sharing. Kevin says, and fan club. And it's so nice when families support each other, encourage each other, because how many times, talking about doctors, when people do grow up in a doctor's family where their father, grandfather, grandmother, whoever, and you're almost forced in a way to follow in their footsteps. And it's great to give people the freedom they deserve, especially in today's world where you have so much more access to information, so much access to other people. You can really test the waters before you jump in. And I think Beverly made a key point along with Imogen. is sometimes you're halfway in and you say, this is definitely not what I wanted. This might satisfy my family's interest, but at what point are you your own person? At what point do you stand up for yourself? And at the end of the day, I know we're talking about profession and things like that. It's, are you happy? Are you comfortable? Are you satisfied with who you are? And, I was always of the ilk that whatever you do that makes you happy, that's what you should continue to do, and not relate to, well, I just want to be a barber, or I just enjoy being a policeman, or whatever it is. Well, that's what you should do, and allow that to open more doors. And in today's world, it's not like it was 30, 40 years ago, where you work for a company, get a gold watch in 30 years, have a comfortable retirement. Everybody's working for themselves, no matter who's writing the check to them.
Right? That's good.
There is no safety. There is no security like it used to be. So once you're aware of that, you have less to lose, and you'd rather be the first person to say, hey, this was great, now I'm moving on, versus someone tapping you on the shoulder saying, well, we don't need you anymore, or we found another way of accomplishing this. And you really feel like, wow, I made a big investment in a short-term opportunity. So Imogen, so much going on, lots of comments. What do you think about what we're doing here today?
Well, I think going back to what we were just talking about before, looking at the comments about proactivity versus reactivity, and it's something I talk about a lot, actually. It's a big kind of comparison I like to talk about a lot, and it's always on my mind, being proactive versus reactive. And I think it's quite common for people my age to go, oh yeah, I guess I'll get a job at some point, or oh, I guess I'll get these grades. It's like, hold on, no, you need to work for that. You need to actually kind of come up with a plan, do something about it, and not just kind of go with the flow, go how the tide takes you. You've got to, as I say, be your own person, stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself, and go, actually, no, I'm going to work hard and actually do something rather than just let things happen to me. And something that just seeing my dad comment there, Kevin, what we talk about a lot is why would you get through the front door like everyone else when you could get through the back door? And so in that sense, say you have a podcast, you could get a job in the normal way, obviously interview, apply, that's completely fine. But there's a lot of people going in through the front door through the normal way. But say you have a podcast and interview the head of the company, and strategically do that if it's in line with what you're doing on your podcast, and you think that would be beneficial, then you're already in. You're already kind of in through the back door. And yes, they might not give you the job just because they know you, but it's going to help. And I interviewed actually after I'd applied, because again, you don't want to look like you're kind of nepotism sort of thing. But I interviewed the head of the course that I'm going to be doing in September at university. And so, yes, technically I'd already got in, but when I met her in person for the first time, I told her about my podcast, and that it already sets you apart. And then she must have read my personal statement that reminds her of who I am. Then I emailed her once I'd applied saying, oh, let's have a conversation and sit down and talk about the course, because it's a very new course. It's the only one in the UK that does what it does in terms of public health and things like that. And so I said, let's sit down and talk about it. And that in that way, it's not getting, yes, okay, I applied in the conventional way, but at the same time, I now am on a first name basis with the head lecturer of that course. And that's hopefully going to help me in the future. And it's just, I think, going back to the kind of main audience of this, and it being, 50-plus-year-old women, I think a lot of the time, having a mum, having aunties, having grandmas who seeing what it's like, they can get not stuck in their ways. It's not what I mean. It's they're very comfortable with what they know, and they're scared to try something new.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you can do it, and you don't even need to go the conventional way. You can do something crazy and try and go in through the back door and break all the boxes and everything we've been saying. So I think that kind of links with a lot of the comments as well. So that's what I'd say.
Well, that's terrific. Knowing that there's more than one way, or more than the traditional way, of waiting your turn, being chosen. where you can come out of the gate and really make it easier for people to choose you because of the ability to elevate above, not compete within, right? And be looked at for who you are, how you present yourself, and really your ambition, especially if it's done in a positive way. Beverly, I think Imogen brings a breath of fresh air
Yeah.
and, and hope, because most people are stereotyped or generalized. And you think of this, whether it's ageism or whether it's youngism, if there's a word to it. But it comes down to everybody's a person, everybody's due respect, and everybody's should have a fair shake in what they do. And I think that brings hope to everybody. Uh, Again, if someone can do it, I can do it. If I can't do it, maybe they can show me a little or help me along the way. So I think that really speaks to empowerment. What's your thoughts, Beverly?
So many, so many, and they've drifted back and forth as you were speaking. Um, the first one that comes to mind was what Imogen was saying about older women. It's true. We have been put in our comfort zones. And the older we are, there's always this tendency to stay in the comfort zone because you know what you know. And you've also achieved a certain amount of whatever you've done. And it takes a risk to go into the back door. And I've always been a risk taker, and I don't think I've gotten anywhere going through the front door, because that's just not the person I am. I don't follow the yellow brick road ever. And when you are creative, which you obviously are, Imogen, you have ideas and you want to express yourself. And that is getting out of the box. And I encourage everybody not to think the way you should be doing, but to start thinking in many different directions. That's formulating strategies. And what you're going to do many times is you may fall on your face, but if you believe in what you're doing, you'll keep at it. Like when you're doing your podcast, it's not easy to do a podcast. You have to find the guest, you have to put it up there, you have to get it out there to the world, etc., and people have to hear it. So you have to continue. It's work. And there are people that you can get to hire to do it, but it's work. You have to believe that you have a purpose in this and that you yourself are getting fulfillment out of it. When I'm using the podcast example, it's for any example. If you want a job, for instance, and you haven't been working in the field for a while, you have to start looking at your value. You have to start saying, well, this is what I know, this is what I do, not looking at the gap. Because everyone, the whole world is looking at the gap. What you don't have, what's missing, right? Well, what you're doing, you don't have to sell yourself to anybody. You have to sell yourself to yourself. It's, I am worthy of getting this job. And when you feel worthy, then it's not about all your marks, because as you know, when you're going to be going to a university or wherever you're going, people, they're all good. There's competition. What makes you different? That's what people want to know. So for Imogen, it's the podcast. For each and every one of us, we have that spark, that difference. And that little difference is when it gets you to your tribe. So whether it's your job, whether it's your people, whether it's your next step of what you want to do, you have to feel that you have the confidence. You may need the guidance, you may need the techniques, you may need all the superficial things which can come, but the basis starts with you, and you have to advocate for yourself. Going back to that word, I am worthy, I can do it. It's all about you.
Well, I think that just lends itself to more hope, more confidence, because if you know there's so much more in front of you, so many more changes that no one can anticipate, The key becomes, how responsive are you to your environment? How easy is it for you to evolve and change in a better way? You know, they say failure is only feedback, right?
Mhm.
And every time something doesn't work, it gives you an understanding of, hey, maybe there's an adjustment that needs to be made. Maybe there's another element I wasn't taking into consideration. And, you know, the more you do, the better you get at doing, because you get more comfortable. I mean, this is one of 800 episodes, right? Which means it's less than 1.1% of total episodes. So if you look at everything in a collective instead of singularly, and not every day is going to be as good as days, some days will be better, but that's what makes life interesting, is the mystery of tomorrow. You know, all it takes is one person to change your life forever.
Mhm.
And you never know when that person will show up. And that makes it exciting, because if you say, to everybody's point of being in a box, that eliminates that opportunity. When you break out of the box, now you're available, now you're accessible. And people tend to gravitate to people that they find value in, right? And it doesn't have to be your knowledge, it just has to be your approach to other people. I mean, how many people had huge talk shows and they can never compete with any of their guests, right? They were never an entertainer, they were never a politician, they were never, but they were able to attract those people, promote those people. And there's so many people who like to live vicariously through others, who are just as happy sometimes if the other person got their chance, the other person got their opportunity, because, you know, if it happened to them, just a matter of time. And why not enjoy the ride? Because they always say it's the journey. The value is not the destination. It's the process that you go through, because once you achieve a destination, you're on to the next one. So, Imogen, we're coming up on 57 minutes. I know these shows go faster than one would anticipate in an hour. What's your final thoughts to the audience?
I think you guys have actually rounded up quite nicely there. We've kind of said a lot of the overarching things you've been trying to talk about. But I think in terms of, you know, what you've just been saying there, Don, I think, yes, one, to round off, one, advocating for yourself, definitely. Realizing, okay, there's a box. Let's get out of the box immediately with everything that we've been saying today. But also another way, as you said, you know, there are people out there who are more than happy if someone else does well and know that their time will come. Advocating for other people, I think, is what I'll just say finally. If you advocate for other people, and we've said a lot about community and working together and helping people and sharing information, if you advocate for other people, you know, in terms of, oh, the universe, it comes back round to you, whatever you think about that, it doesn't hurt. Like, hopefully you will get something back from that as well. If you're advocating for others, hopefully they're advocating for you as well, and it's that whole community and working together for a shared goal. That's what I'd say to round this off.
Well, that's terrific. And you're an inspiration for so many others. And I think, you know, you're opening the road that sometimes you won't even know you're doing, but it is making an effect. Beverly, this has been a very different and interesting show. What's your final thoughts?
It's been a terrific show, and I love talking to you, Imogen. I love your perspective, and it just brings the whole thing home. And yes, I do encourage people to advocate for themselves, and of course, advocate for others. But by being yourself, it's subliminal. You're advocating for others. You become a role model and you become a mentor, and that is wonderful. Okay, so when you're looking at Imogen here, you're a role model for so many people. And I hope that in this show today, somebody has gotten something back. And if they've gotten anything back from me, it's be yourself, advocate for yourself. You can do it if you believe in yourself, and you can get help also to help you believe in yourself. All you have to do is want to. And that's where hope is involved. And you brought that word in many times. Dawn. It's keep going, keep learning, open up. The world is open to you. And all you have to do is want to do it and be open to do it. And so if anyone wants to also reach me, you will find me here on LinkedIn. You will find me on reinventimpossible.com. I always provide a free conversation. And thank you so much, Dawn. This was a wonderful, great show. And thank you, Imogen.
Well, I can never thank Beverly enough, and that's why I always have Beverly back. And Imogen, why don't you share what your podcast is so other people can get to know you better and get the benefit of future opportunities?
Yes, so I'm Imogen Ayres on Instagram and LinkedIn, but my podcast is Medisynergy, so MEDISYNERGY, so kind of Medi Synergy, and that's where I am. That's where my podcast is, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual. That's where you can find me.
Awesome.
That's terrific. And really quickly, want to recognize Dennis with a comment. Believe the front door has the benefit of being out front about public health. Stay healthy. Beatrice says, golden guidance counselors, namaste. Stay clear for the flying monkey. Okay. And with that said, I want to thank everybody for participating today. Without the audience, there is no show. And feel free to reach out to Beverly, Imogen, and myself, because we're more than just a show. We're people out there wanting to help others as much as we can. So, that gives you additional access and permission. So with that said, thank you, Imogen. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you,
Dawn.
Come back in 23 hours and it'll be Carol Dakin and myself talking about funding. And with that said, go out and have a beautiful day.